funniest moments you might have had during that time?
You know, well, the biggest case, I worked in a DEA task force. My partner, Tony, started a case where we went up on 4 cell phones. They were Chicago phones being operated in New York by former members of the Mexican military. And they did not know how to deal drugs. So they're waiting for huge loads of cocaine to come across the border and distribute them. So the first call we get is, hey, where you at? We have 4 phones basically talking to each other. So we have all these different translators and different pods, and this pod's calling that pod. And it's this crazy situation. And the leader says to one gentleman, where are you? He goes, you know, I'm in the place. He goes, what place? He goes, you know, the place. He goes, no, what place? He goes, and he goes to give the address, and the guy stops. He goes, wait, I know where we're at. Never, ever give that address out on the phone or whatever it was. So he goes, oh, you know, sorry, whatever. He goes, I know where you're at. So anyway, they have a conversation. I hang up. With that, the guy picks up the phone and orders a pizza to the location. So we go there, and these Mexican military guys are supposed to pass off something like 150 kilos to these Colombians. So they don't know how to do a drug deal. And when you do a drug deal like that, you use a minivan, you put the keys in the ashtray, you walk out, and you tell the guy, car's around the corner, they take it, and then the money is exchanged later on. It's the way they do business. These guys refused to leave the keys. They said, I think these Colombians are trying to rip us off. My partner jumps in a marked police car. He tells them, chase these guys away real quick. So he chases the Colombians away. The Mexican guys agreed to leave the keys, and with that, my partner jumps in and steals the car loaded with 150 kilos. Now we're listening to the phones. The Colombians and the Mexicans now want to kill each other because they think the other has done something. Anyway, so we figure that's the end of the wiretap. They're not going to talk anymore. No. The next day they make a deal to do about 300 kilos and park it in the Queens Mall on Queens Boulevard in like the 60s over in Woodhaven. So they let that deal go down. We follow the car up to Harlem, and we grab the drugs there, and we put out a fake press release that said that an investigation into Dominican organized crime netted this load. So now they still think they're safe. Anyway, they said, don't worry, Bugs Bunny's coming to visit us on Saturday. Long story short, a tractor trailer comes up, they meet this driver, we pull up the vent of the trailer, and it's loaded with carrots. We ended up grabbing close to 1,700 kilos in the back of that. Now to make the case, I mean, drugs are drugs. People don't realize how much 2,000 plus kilos are in street value and everything else. But turns out that the load was orchestrated by the governor of Quintana Roo, Mexico. He fled to Belize, I guess about, maybe 7, 8 years ago. I got a call from the Southern District. They finally extradited him after like 10 years or something like that, and we were going to have to testify. And at the last minute, there was a plea. And what's funny is all those guys, we're talking, I think we got $1 million in cash, close to 2,500 kilos in a matter of a week. Those guys only got 10 years in jail. They had no criminal records, whatever it is. Now, if you were a predicate felon and you get caught with a kilo of crack, you're probably doing 25, 30 years back then. So it's just a strange way of how these things, you know.
Okay, so you had Colombians and you had the Mexicans.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a case against Cosa Nostra with drugs? Or will you ever have a big investigation with Cosa Nostra?
The only thing I ever came across in those days with Cosa Nostra with drugs is, well, one, we had the Gus Faraci case. It was not my team, obviously, but he was murdered. Everett Hatcher was murdered, an undercover DEA agent. So DEA really went after organized crime after that. I ended up with some silly cases, in-house marijuana grows and things like that, because marijuana was so expensive back then. So if you grew the hydro, it was worth a lot of money, low prison sentence.
Right. But we weren't known as big drug dealers to you guys back then, right?
No, I never even thought of it. But there were special groups that, after that murder, that really took a closer look at it. And let's face it, if you're working for an organization and you're one of the low on the totem pole, that's a way to make really good money fast.
Yeah.
And But of course, it
But
brings the organization down.
the reason I say that, because I have said this and people, oh, Michael, that's not true. And they mentioned Vito Genovese and everybody else. We were not allowed to mess with drugs.
Right.
During my era, we were told if you dealt with drugs, you die.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying guys weren't doing it on the sneak, but you didn't hear things like this would kill us. We just weren't allowed to do it.
No, of all my years in wiretap rooms, I was never aware of a mob wiretap involving drugs.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Billy.
Yeah.
You've,
But,
you
obviously...
validated me on that.
But I tell you what, too, it's just like I was talking about before, when the U.S. Attorney's Office hears either it's a bad cop or a member of organized crime, if guys knew that there was a small-time mobster doing it, they would probably hit it because they figured they'll work their way up.
Yeah,
So,
I got it.
But yeah, no, I never was aware of it. I heard about teams doing it, but never. And I don't think they were doing big weight when they were doing it.
No, it was small stuff, because guys were afraid.
Absolutely.
They couldn't do it. Look, I knew a dear friend of mine who knew all my life, a good soldier, blew his brains out because he, in a phone booth, Tony Orgello, I don't know if you know the name, Tony the Gawk, they called him, but he got involved in a small drug deal, and he was worried. He said, I'm not going to let them walk me in a room.
Wow.
Yeah, and I took off from Florida, told him, don't worry about it, it's going to be okay, it's a small-time thing, I can cover it. I was just captain at the time. I get off my plane in Florida, I get a call, he went into a phone booth and just scared. He said, they're not going to walk me into a room. Wow. That's how serious it was.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it. But you just validated that. I'm
absolutely, yeah, not big play. And I think if you look at Paul Castellano's death, a lot of those guys were about to go to trial with drugs.
Absolutely.
And that had to add to the...
Absolutely.
I'm jumping on your side on this one because me and my guys are going to take a hit. So whatever you want to do, I'm down for it.
Absolutely. No doubt about that.
Hey, do you ever remember the name Angelo Prisco?
I do, yeah.
So Angelo was a Genovese guy.
Right.
Jersey, and a bit of back and forth from the Bronx. The reason I bring it up is since I've been out in L.A., I remembered an old case where we had I'll call him corrupt, I guess. And maybe you've actually heard of him out here. A guy named Bobby DeBrino, who was a retired NYPD cop who claimed he was a major narcotics detective. Turns out he was cousins with Angelo Prisco. And Prisco was in jail for an arson case, and DeBrino came up with an idea to, right after 9/11, to approach Hollywood insiders and say, hey, let's fly out some stars to do a benefit for the Port Authority cops that died during 9/11. So I know it was at least Drew Barrymore, some other people. They jump on a plane with this guy, who's not a good guy. Just because he's a retired cop does not make him a good guy. Ties to the Genovese family. They fly out and they do this benefit. And while they're at the benefit, DeBrino approaches Governor McGreevy's people and says, hey, listen, we believe in your, it's actually during his campaign, we believe in you, we want to donate money to your campaign. And so shortly thereafter, McGreevy becomes governor. And shortly thereafter, only about 2 years into his sentence, Angelo Prisco gets parole.
Wow.
So I guess about 6 months later, McGreevy steps down. He had all sorts of issues, but the LA sheriffs put DeBrino on a plane and with a subpoena, and shortly thereafter, he stepped down.
No, I haven't heard of that.
So there's all sorts of things out there that, it's just having the utter gall to go do these things.
Yeah.
Just, I would say, oh, don't do that. There's no way they're going to go for this.
Yeah.
And they do.
They did.